Assalamu alaikum. Let's start replying our doctor's questions. The next one was from Dr. Islam asking about all 4 techniques. I'm Dr. Mustafa Noor. I will be with you and we'll talk about this time about all 4 technique. First of all, we can call it all on X according to surgical plan, according to the available bone, according to many criteria. It may be our full arch, either on 4 implants or 5 or 6 implants or more, according to different consideration. Let's start with talking about introduction about the concept, what's its advantage, its advantage, its clinical application, and its load, what about load consideration and surgical approach, different prosthetic option for this concept. First of all, let's start with challenges in fully edentulous cases. In fully edentulous cases, we face many challenges like normatization of the maxillary sinus, leading to less available posterior implants, especially the posterior maxilla. Again, loss of bone in the posterior mandible, which will lead to major surgical complications, major surgical needs like sinus lifting, like nerve repositioning. Some authors describe zygomatic implant, zygoma implant, to avoid encouragement of implant or sinus pneumatization to engage the zygoma implant. Others talk about pterygoid implants to engage the pterygoid plates. Again, many challenges we face in these conditions. Again, another challenges we face is prosthetic considerations. Sometimes we need many implants, it has higher failure rate. Sometimes we need bar, we need attachment, many complex prosthetic challenges. So some authors, mainly the main one of them, or the biggest one of them, was Dr. Powell Mello, a famous Portuguese dentist or doctor, which described the concept of all-in-4. He described that we can load a full arch implant supported restoration on only 4 implants, 2 axially loaded implants into anterior mandible or anterior maxilla, and 2 tilted implants along with the maxillary sinus wall or the mental foramen for lower arch to avoid any major surgical procedure, any major grafting, or any major surgical complication which may happen. Followed by, after insertion of these 4 implants, if the case permit, we can load these implants immediately with a temporary provisional restoration for 6 months or more, then converting this temporary restoration by final restoration according to the need of the patient. So this great scientist Paulo Melo, which described this technique, which we call all-in-4, by loading a full arch supported restoration on only 4 implants. Uh, what is the advantage of this technique? Advantage of this technique, it allows us to load a full arch restoration on less amount of implant, less cost, simplifying the treatment if it's okay. Avoid any surgical complication like maxillary sinus pneumatization, as we told you before, like any nerve repositioning or zygomatic implant with a major surgery, and it will fulfill the function and aesthetic need of the patient by immediately loading if the case permit. So it is a successful option, especially for major challenges we face in a full arch cases. The main concern here was the load complication. What about the load consideration in these cases? Many authors describe that loading a full arch restoration on only 4 implants will jeopardize the success rate or prognosis rate of this restoration. One of them, Dr. Kirkmanov, which stated that from a biomechanical point of view, loading a full arch restoration on 4 implants or tilting the implants will not adversely affect the bone resorption. In his study, he said that. Again, Dr. Capelli et al. For 2007 stated that using a longer implant anterior zone will increase the survival and the prognosis rate of your restoration. So many authors talk about in a follow-up studies of the cases which is loaded on a 4 implants, there is a higher success rate or higher prognosis rate if the proper criteria or the proper consideration was allowed. One of the great scientists, Dr. Christopher Hu, in 2012, also stated As we stated before, Dr. Krikmanov and Dr. Capelli stated that the survival rate of the implants increases by using higher or longer implants in the anterior zone to engage the bone to increase survival rate. Again, tilting the implant will not jeopardize or not affect any of bone resorption if the criteria of the surgery and the prosthetic appliance fulfill the ideal criteria of this consideration. Um, in attempt of that, Dr. Christopher who in 2012 also stated that or confirmed that any prosthetic complication will increase the failure rate of the restoration. So we have to fulfill the ideal prosthetic consideration of this technique, which is guaranteeing or the shallow anterior guidance to avoid any overloading of the implant, guaranteeing a group function occlusion in the posterior zone to distribute the load over large amount of the implant or distribute the load between the adjacent implants. Centric relation must coincide with maximum intercuspation with absence of any prematurity or any interference in centric occlusion. A very short cantilever, which is very important here, very short cantilever to avoid any longer cantilever because cantilever will increase the failure rate of your restoration. So we have to end our restoration with a very, very short cantilever, limit our cantilever length, and the patient instructed for the first 3 months, 3 months in soft diet to avoid any overloading the implant. If we guarantee these considerations, so the survival rate or the prognosis of your restoration will increase. What about the loading? What about the surgical phase? As we told you before, that tilting the implant with the anterior wall of the sinus or the mental foramen by 30 or 45 degrees, this needs proper planning. Proper planning how we have two modification or modalities, either using a surgically guide or 3D design surgical guide using implant planning software, which we call prostatic backward planning, with a virtual implant software like Implant Studio for 3Shape, like Exoplan, like EDS Pro, Dental Wings. Many softwares will design your restoration in a prostatic backward planning to properly design the implant position according to the future restoration. Again, برضو again Noble Biocare and Sirona and J Dental and will apply or provide what is called all-on-4 guide, which will guide the insertion of the implant parallel to the mental foramen with a 30 or 45 degree, or with the anterior wall of the sinus of 30 or 45 degree. So proper planning here is mandatory to avoid or to increase the success rate of your restoration, especially tilting the implant is very critical here. So using the 3D surgical guide according to the plan, or using all-on-4 guide for different companies, as we told you, will aid or help in proper maintenance or proper or increased success of your surgery. What about the stability of your implants? Here, Dr. Temyuda et al. Described that the implant must be less prepared to guarantee stability. The implant or the final torquing of the abutment should be at least 25 to 30 Newton centimeter to increase the stability. And if you need, or if you ought to make any uh, pre or immediately loading. So a primary stability is mandatory. Primary stability here is mandatory. We can measure primary stability by the Ostel, where the Ostel reading must be at least 60 to guarantee your immediately loading using your provisional restoration, or the previously complete denture, or converting this complete denture with a conversion prosthetic technique into a fixed restoration. So if you need to make immediate loading, so the final torque of the restoration of the abutment must be 25 to 30 Newton centimeter, and the implant must be with a greater stability and minimal preparation of the surgical place. So increasing success rate will depend mainly on the proper planning during the surgery, a proper planning of the implant prosthetic restoration, guaranteeing So after guaranteeing the primary stability, so we can load the implants immediately. As for the prostatic phase, and we have to gain a common pass insertion due to the tilting the implants 30 to 45. So we have to use a multi-unit abutment. Multi-unit abutment come in different fabricated abutment come in different angulation, either 17 or 35. Here to get a common pass insertion with the anteriorly axially inclined implant. Um, some manufacturer talk about having this angulation in the implant fracture itself. Okay. One of them is co-axis implant having an inclination at the top of the fracture 12 or 24 or 36, all to according to the plan or the pre-prostatic planning, we all to get the post insertion or to make the prosthesis insertion access is easy. So the prostatic solution for tilting of these implants, either multi-unit implants, multi-unit abutments, or using a co-axis implant with angulation. After that, after having a compass insertion, so we can load the prostatic or pre-designed prostatic PMA restoration, or converting the complete denture of the patient into a fixed restoration, but by what's called prostatic conversion technique. After that, let's talk about one of the famous uh, Italian scientist or implantologist, which talk about intraoral welding and splinting of adjacent implant to increase success rate of immediately loading Olin 4 or Olin X for our supported restriction. This famous scientist is Dr. Marco De Gidi, and his team talk about splinting of the adjacent implants intraoperatively or intraorally by using a rigid titanium arch wire to splint the additional implant to distribute the load around this implant and increase the success rate of your restoration. We talk about for guaranteeing this technique, we have to have the welded abutment, special type of abutment called welded abutment, and what's called titanium wires and welding machine supplied by one of the manufacturer like Dental, welding unit, a welding machine, and titanium arch coming in different diameters, and welded abutment. All of this to allow splinting of the implants intraorally using this welding machine to guarantee distribution of the load around multiple implants and increase its success rate. Let's show you one of the video talking about this technique. Here intraorally, after applying the welded abutment and manipulating and shaping the titanium wire, it undergo intraoral welding or intraoral splinting using the titanium wire and the welding machine. All of this to distribute the load between adjacent implants, as I told you, and increase the success rate of your immediate restoration. This is done intraorally by giving the patient anesthesia and the prosthesis. To show you here, okay, welding the implants or adjacent implants intraorally, and this transferring this appliance to the lab and forming and convert the denture or patient previous denture to fixed restoration, but what we call conversion prosthetic technique. So Dr. Marco Gidi talk about this concept to increase success rate of your restoration. After yeah, maintaining the provisional restoration for 6 months, Dr. Marco still said that we can leave the patient with this temporary restoration as long as it doesn't cause any harm of the patient. The patient is not complaining of this restoration in form of its functioning well, its statics as well, its phonetics as well as its hygiene. So we can leave the patient with temporary restoration. Any complaint from this temporary restoration or after osseointegration of the implants, we can load or can convert. We have different option to form a definitive restoration of the maneuver, either using what's called 7-star restoration, titanium full arch restoration, titanium full arch milled framework, and using a separate zirconia restorations, or we can make posterior bridges here and single restoration made of zirconia, for example, and posterior. Um, so after ending of the provisional period or duration, as I told you, we can leave the patient with a temporary respiration as long as it doesn't cause any harm or complication. Or if the patient wants to convert this temporary restoration to a final one, we have different options for the final restoration. One of them is what's called what some scientists called a seven-star prosthesis, which is a titanium full arch restoration, titanium framework for arch restoration by milling or 3D printing technology, most appropriate by milling technology, and forming opaque ceramic material, opaque portion to mask the color, and a full contour zirconia restoration, separate crowns from zirconia or bridges of, according to your plan, zirconia over this titanium framework. So it's a metal framework made from titanium and covered by zirconia, a single restoration or a single crowns or bridges. Sometimes we can mask or veneer this titanium framework by a special type of porcelain which needs special precautions. Another option you have for forming a full arch material is using a full arch zirconia monolithic restoration. One of the يعني modification or modalities to use for a final restoration is a full arch monolithic zirconia framework, which is in the literature, many of the scientists or the researcher does not prefer this type of restoration because it's heavy in weight, its passivity of it is less, it's more liable to fracture, although its aesthetic feature is high. So we can use titanium framework and using the zirconia over it. Another option the literature talk about is by HBB or what's called peak family, and its derivative either by HBB or Dentukeep or Pecton. And forming this by HBB, it's just a framework. It's opaque and ivory, white in color, so it have to be veneered either by composites. It does not guarantee you with a long-term aesthetic need, so we can also use a separate zirconia or max crowns over this framework. So this is options we have to use a final restoration or over your four implant or what we call by X implant, as we told you before. So in conclusion, Dr. Islam, in conclusion, Olum 4 is one of the concepts first described by Dr. Paulo Melo. He stated, as I told you, two axial implants in the anterior zone and two tilted implant to avoid any surgical complication or any major surgery. But now we have modification of this concept, which is all on X, as I told you, all on X according to a plan. If we can increase the number of implants, it will give you more benefits because loading a fixed restoration on only four implants, especially if you have a distal cantilever, will and the material or protected material was rigid or having a high model of elasticity, mechanically different than the titanium implants, will jeopardize your success rate. So if you can increase the implant numbers, it's very good. It will increase the success rate of your restoration. So we can call it all in 5, all in 6, all in 7, or whatever, all in X according to your plan. But to load a fixed prosthesis over a full arch fixed prosthesis over implants, the minimum number of implant based in the literature. I don't talk about any case report. I'm talking about what's based in the literature is for implants, or what described by Dr. Paulo Melo for implants. Now I will leave you with a video describing the steps of the surgical and prostatic phase. It's a very interesting video. Let's see it together. Let's start with this video, which illustrates the steps of Olum 4 or Oren X technique. First of all, securing, as I told you, securing the Olum 4 guide supplied by different manufacturers, Nobel Biocare or Supply or GD, supplying the template or the Olum 4 guide in place. We can, in case of making of this surgery, it's not guided surgery, but we can make this surgery guided by using any of the virtual implant planning software and surgical guide. After securing the guide in place, we begin by drilling the posterior implants first. First of all, tilting the implant, as you see in the guide, this angulation of tilting the implant 30 or 45, and here we're going in the angulation of 30. And then this is the initial or pilot drilling, and then sequential drilling according to the first drill, sequential drilling until reaching the pre-designed implant drill. As I told you, we have to make under drilling to increase implant stability for the immediate loading protocol. Sequential drilling. After that, securing the implant in place by increasing the torque and decreasing the speed. Securing the implant in place, as you see here, the implant is parallel to the anterior wall of the sinus according to the guide or the plan. And then screwing the implant. Here is one of the templates or the guide to ensure the angulation of the implant. We will unsecure or untighten this guide and place very important a multi-unit. The first one is to guarantee me I will use either 17 or 30 angle multi-unit. Here we use the multi-unit with a proper angulation, securing the multi-unit in place, very important here, by using the screw. Multi-unit is the two pieces, as you see here. This is the first piece. Final screwing. The final torque, as I told you, for the immediate loading must be at least 25 Newton centimeter, and then securing or tightening the second piece of the multi-unit. Here, the posterior implant is done with its implant in position and the multi-unit in place. Again, final torquing must be for the immediate loading protocol must be 25. So the same goes for the anterior implant. Anterior implant is axially inclined, and we need parallel inclined. Okay, using the straight multi-unit, it will elevate the implant position, and then securing the temporary abutment or temporary cylinder. Sometimes a plastic abutment, sometimes titanium abutment, titanium temporary cylinders. Most probably it's better to be titanium temporary cylinders. Securing them in place and applying a rubber dam, one of the isolation to isolate. I will tell you why. And then securing the temporary restoration or the complete denture of the patient's previous complete denture in place, and attaching or adding self-cure resin, hard resin material, thermoplastic resonance material to attach the cylinder to the complete denture of the patient in place. What is the advantage of that? This is the main value of the rubber dam is to avoid any excess material to go in the implant side or the surgical side. But now we see the complete denture again. We see the complete denture of the patient according to making a hole in the denture to convert this denture into a fixed restoration. Okay, removal of the restoration, securing multi-unit healing abutment, and convert this complete denture or previously complete denture of the patient into a fixed restoration by removal of the internal flanges, internal parietal side, and removing any excess thermoplastic resonance material. And now our complete denture is converted to the fixed restoration. By the way, it's mainly made by the lab, or you can make it clinically or in office. After that, securing your temporary restoration, now fixed restoration, unsecure the untightening the healing abutment or multi-unit healing abutment, and then securing after securing the temporary restoration and passage of your provisional restoration time, now it come converting the temporary restoration into a final one. As I told you before, there is a different modalities or different selection of the final restoration. Here, unsecuring or removal of the temporary restoration, and converting here we use a titanium framework, and veneering this titanium framework either by porcelain, special type of porcelain, or the best to use a separate zirconia restorations or posterior bridges to zirconia and anteriorly single restorations for better aesthetics and hygiene. After that, seating the restoration in place. Here come veneering of your restoration by porcelain, hybrid restoration for arch hybrid restoration, having a soft tissue, rehabilitation, pink aesthetics and white aesthetics, and securing or tightening your temporary or your final restoration in place with a final torque 15, 20, or 25. This is a technique, what's called all-on-4 technique. It's surgical and the prostatic phase. Hope we answered your question, Dr. Islam. And there is this is my contact. If anyone wants to contact me, thank you for participating and watching us. See you in the upcoming answering your question. Thank you.